first-person co-op game set in the grim dark future of Warhammer 40,000. Welcome to Tertium, a sprawling hive city on the brink of destruction. You are a reject, a convict freed to serve the Inquisition in this darkest of hours. It is your duty to fight, and, if necessary, die for the Emperor. You can expect no help, no reinforcements. You are Tertium's last line of defense. Is about to begin. Rejects will rise.
Hell yeah. Is the game question wrong? And just check the stream.
So, I'm kind of attached to, like, another monitor here. So the Fatshark setup is much bigger than my little PC setup. We have a guest with us today. It's this guy, not this guy. But no, hello, my name is Akshi. I'm a community manager actually at Fatshark Games today. I am in Sweden. This is my last day in the office. I've been here for about a week before heading back to North America. With me today, I have...
Hi, I'm Steve. I'm the executive producer here at Fatshark and on Darktide.
Yeah. And I'm Hedge, for those who don't know me. I'm sure most of you do. Also community manager like actually here at Fatshark. I'm not in Sweden at the moment. I'm still in southern UK.
I am seeing that people say this is doubled. I have the amazing, you can't see him, but to the left of me is Tim. You can stick your hand out and say hi.
That's Tim's hand.
Yeah, Tim is currently...
I mean, it wouldn't be a Fatshark stream without echo.
Yeah, we are attempting a Fatshark stream without echo. Tim fixed it. Tim is magnificent. He spent the past number of hours getting this whole setup kind of fixed and ready to go. Can we give Tim, like, a happy round of applause? This guy can't do it because he has a pineapple. You're showing us Google.
Oh, sorry. So, I'm breaking the stream.
This is great. This is great.
So,
Good start. Good start.
Yes. Leo, join Discord.
Okay.
Animation.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
So, So we are back from Gamescom, and Steve was one of the wonderful sharks who actually decided to venture out of the tank and be in Gamescom.
Yes, I was there.
Oh, what was that like?
It was super fun. We had Darktide playable to the public. I think so many people rolled through and got to actually get some hands-on, which was such an awesome thing to see and be a part of. We were there for 5 days, 11 hours a day, just rolling through and bashing heretics, and it was amazing.
So it's not our first time at Gamescom. It's the first time we've really had this huge kind of amazing booth and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think being part of the Level Infinite booth really helped us bring a lot of stuff. We had 20 computers in that sort of main showroom floor area, and then we had another 8 over with our friends at HyperX, which was pretty freaking cool. They had some very powerful machines over there, which was awesome to see.
What did people kind of get to experience you got to play?
We decided to keep it as simple as possible. So you'd go through the lines You get in, we'd want to make it so that you could play as much Darktide as possible, but we had a very long line. We had more than a 4-hour wait at a few points, which we had to ask some people to go explore the rest of the showroom floor, come back when the line's a bit shorter. But we would try to get another group of people in around every 15 minutes. And then every day we would put up a new mission. We had 3 different missions that you could experience throughout the event. So it was kind of, it was really good. Lots of people came back, of course, to play new missions because we like new missions.
That's why the line was so long, is people were coming back.
Probably.
People were coming back. So that's a good thing. Wasn't there like the line was so long? It's like you can't have a line this long. There's a fire hazard.
We created a bit of a fire hazard, and so security asked us very kindly to disperse some of the crowds. So if you were in that side of things, apologies. Hopefully you actually got back in and were able to play, because it was a really cool thing to do. But sometimes it was our line is so long that the conference or Gamescom today will be over before you get to play anyways. So you might as well go somewhere else for a bit and try again tomorrow.
But we actually talked to a lot of media outlets. Are there any places where people can kind of read these write-ups and what they can expect for those who weren't at Gamescom?
Definitely. I think probably the best thing that you can do is jump over on Twitter and follow Darktide and Fatshark, and I think we sort of retweet a lot of those things pretty quick. So if you're curious, that's a good place to start, I would recommend.
All right, so we did want to answer a couple of questions about the game in general. I'm going to let Hedge kind of do this little bit of the section, so it's not just me talking your ear off.
Sure thing. So Steve, Gamescom for you was a really good time. What was like one of your sort of biggest takeaways, I guess, from the experiences that people had there?
Yeah, so we didn't have any of our sort of like onboarding flow in place. So there was a few little things there that I was really happy to see that we have covered in that like first 2 hours experience, like really trying to get people in, sort of get to know what the sort of Darktide experience is and sort of give you some hints and tips and tricks on how to play in there. So there were some hiccups there that we kind of expected to see. But I think the biggest takeaway that I had is, even though the game can be very challenging at times, people looked like they were legitimately having a very, very good time, even if that was, being set on fire and dying and just trying to get, your squad back up and then all of a sudden getting a squad wipe and then jumping in and playing it again. So, it looked like people were just having a great time
jumping
in and playing the game.
So I'm going to try Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, please.
Yeah, I know that there's reverb, so I'm going to try playing a little bit of microphone bongo to see if we can make this work. So chat, let me know once I mute my mic when Steve's talking if it works.
Okay. It's just a general mic test. We also got, I can introduce this man, Mr. Mats. You've probably seen him before. I mean, he's been around a bit, so if you're Vermintide days, then you should probably recognize this friendly face. Yeah, and maybe even from some of the interviews, if you were sort of paying attention online there was some stuff going on there. I can't read the thing, so, yeah, it was good. So general impressions, people really liked it. Lots of people were leaving the booth saying, I need to play this game, and that's exactly what we wanted to see. So it was really uplifting and energizing. For me, at least. I don't know what your experience was. You were more in the media booth, talking to a lot of...
Yeah, I was locked in and giving interviews 9 hours a day for a couple of days, so it was a very, very, very small world. And then, they let us out once a day, once dragged into an IGN booth without any warning, going, you're doing an interview now. And I'm like, about what? And they was like, I don't know, you'll see. And, but it's fun. I mean, I think we had better air conditioning in the little booth. It didn't feel like it because it was 40 degrees hot, and then you got outside on the show floor, and then when you got outside it was like hitting a brick wall of hot air and that gamer smell of a Gamescom area that we all love and are familiar with. was
Excitement.
Yes,
and energy.
it was. Yeah. But I mean, the cool thing of it was that everyone was kind of super psyched up about just getting back to going to a show like that. You could feel that we haven't had this thing for a couple of years now, and people were really happy. Like, these are my people, kind of feelings.
Yeah. Now, who are you? You just showed up here.
Yeah. Hi, I am Mats. I am known as the combat guy. I don't know what my official title is really, but I'm the team captain of the combat team and combat design lead or something. I don't like titles really, but I make the combat and gameplay and enemies and weapons and abilities and explosions and gibs and all the kind of anything that blows up or goes boom or breaks in the game is our team and my thing.
So, for being in combat, what are some differences and maybe some similarities between Vermintide and Darktide?
So
Really, once you get your hands in it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we really started out with was we wanted to keep the kind of Vermintide combat because it's very, very precious to us. But originally we talked about it like an extension of the melee combat system and the melee combat gameplay that we had in Vermintide. So basically extending that with a ranged gameplay loop that quickly kind of melded into something that we refer to as hybrid combat. And like I usually say, like the melee combat of Vermintide has its quirks, and it's a full gameplay loop that you need to master and learn and understand. It's a kind of standalone experience. And then you have the classical FPS experience of, aiming, shooting, running, dying, headshotting, recoil management, sways, all of those things. If you mash these together, you get something that's very similar to both those things, but it's a thing of its own, right? So hybrid combat becomes the thing. Are you adjusting mics?
I'm gonna try and get you two to maybe share a mic
Okay, we can
because
do that.
they're kind of reverberating off
Oh,
each
they're
other.
they're not behaving.
Yeah, they're not
Do you want me
behaving
to
We
well.
can
this one?
voice
So maybe-
cast into it.
Yeah, so
I'll do
maybe
that.
you can like
My
use
headphone
one
is
of them
getting
to
stuck
talk
as well.
here, see what happens, but
Yeah.
chat
No.
is like it's echoing.
Okay. Better now for everyone?
They said that's better. Yep.
Excellent. No, but just like the quick summary of it is, we usually have to ask Vermintide players to kind of remember the ranged side of things and switch over to ranged because we have that now. And for people who are unfamiliar with Vermintide, we ask them to remember that they have a melee weapon, because when you're getting swarmed and you're getting overrun by like 75 different poxwalkers trying to hit you in the face with a rusty wrench or something, you kind of need to stop trying to back up and reload while crying, and instead like whip out your chainsword and stab them in the face. So it becomes a very kind of back and forth loop of trying to determine at what range you're fighting throughout the game. Talk a lot about Vermintide having like a melee range and then the occasional sniping of elites and specials. Here we kind of have melee range, we have far range with proper cover shooting and all of the aimings and stuff, and then we have a close range that is more reminiscent of old school FPSs with a lot of dodging and kind of submachine guns, shotguns and stuff like that. So the enemies will try to force you into playing at their preferred ranged. Melee enemies will try to rush you if you're doing ranged, and vice versa. Like it's always a good idea to shut down that heavy machine gunner using a thunder hammer, because you're basically locking him in melee at the end of the day. You can like throw in the safe word banana if you want me to stop rambling, because I have a tendency of doing that.
I don't think I'm hoping they can
I don't think there's
by using your mic. Chat, let me know. I'm off screen because I need to read the chat. But I think a lot of people have a lot of questions about the combat and kind of what they are going to get into. So I'm gonna see if I can get I have people. So whenever there's a Fatshark stream in the office, a lot of sharks are like, "What's going on?" And then they'll open the door to the streaming room and pop their head in.
Which is great.
So if you hear things, that's why. So I'm just gonna go through some of the chat and see what questions we have. I did see a question of, what's up with the OST? It is in the process of being mastered. We literally just spoke about it in a meeting like yesterday. So it's on the way. It's on the way. Let's see.
A question I pulled from chat, if that helps.
And
So in
Max
terms of like,
confirm if the gun the vet was shown during Gamescom was an autogun or a bolter. The AK looking thing we saw him with for like 5 seconds.
the AK-looking thing for like 5 seconds out of Gamescom. So that is definitely an autogun. We have, for the kind of technical testers we've been doing, and a lot of the kind of stuff we've been showing so far has a very limited range of weapons on purpose. And then we sneak some other things in as we're kind of, showcasing the stuff that we do have. We have, what we can say is our approach to making weapons, we've taken that a bit further than we did for Vermintide. I mean, the example we take is usually people refer to a lasgun as a lasgun, right? But that's saying boomstick in modern terms. There are very, very zoomed in and detailed the factors that determine exactly what lasgun you have. So rather than doing lasguns generically, we would like to do specific patterns of lasguns. So we zoom in on like which Forge world this is from, and then we zoom in a bit more to get that proper human perspective, and then we start talking about which marks or which variations of different lasguns are we actually doing. So is this like a short stub thing used for Navy armsmen lasgun, or is it more of a classical kind of rifleman Imperial Guard Astra Militarum lasgun? So we tend to go into lots of details, and there is more than one autogun in the game, is what I can say. And it's very much fun to work with, because you basically get to go, oh yeah, this is gonna shoot a little bit different like this. And it's all about finding, I mean, our hopes with that approach is, as a player, you'll find your kind of fantasy or your preferred loadout, right? If you're into combat rifles, you're gonna find like a lasgun of a certain pattern that you kind of like, but then we want to provide you with multiple different choices within that area. So like if you want to tune your playstyle and find the correct kind of this particular subtype of this weapon category, you should be all set, and then hopefully have many wondrous discussions on the interwebs about which mark of a particular pattern is the best.
Yeah, I think it would be pretty disappointing if it was just like we made last gun is now done.
Yeah.
All last gun is complete.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what you guys want.
So, I think there's a question. I'm going to try and combine these two questions. Is how there are some things that are different in Darktide that we haven't seen in Vermintide, like sprinting, for example. That is not a thing in Vermintide. So, is there advantage for people who have already played Vermintide? How fast are they going to be able to pick up this game? And for those new mechanics, why were they added?
Well, that's two questions. So yes, you will definitely have an advantage, I think, if you come from Vermintide, and I think it's basically twofold. One, you're gonna have the melee kind of combat principles down to a point, which is always a bit of a learning curve. So I mean, all of those classical things are there with the light heavies and the heavies and the combos and the blocking and the push follow-ups and all of those things. And then when it comes to adding things, we have added quite a lot of things, but all of them are added from a perspective of actually fleshing out and providing that hybrid combat, the extension into ranged, right? So, I mean, when we started out with that, we made some early prototypes where we're basically just like, let's try to make an ADS and leave it at that. Just slight improvement over Vermintide, but as soon as you put a gun into the hands of a player, he will say, this kind of looks like other games I have played before, and those games, they only do and focus on range, so we want the full, all bells and whistles and fancy things, and you know, stability goes up when you crouch or you have sprints and stuff. So the sprinting specifically, if we want to talk about that, and it's one of the kind of tools we provide in our ranged combat loop as a defensive thing. It's also key to that deciding at which range you're fighting at. So we refer to it internally as the kind of assault gestalt, if you will, when we're very highbrow and talk about our design principles. But the long and the short of it is that you do dodge range shots when sprinting, unless you're sprinting right at them or straight away from them, so you can use it for flanking and as a kind of defensive measures if you're getting overrun with lots of shots from nasty enemies. You can also use it in conjunction with sliding, for instance, to kind of dodge immediate shots and just lock people into melee. And it's also good fun when you're trying to save someone. So we built that into that whole thing with, risk reward. If you get shot and run out of stamina, you start fumbling yourself. You have the toughness that kind of protects you while sprinting, but you can, you know, play with many different kind of configurations of that to make something that is either very John Wick assault sprint through hails of fire to get at someone to stab them in the face, or simply has it as a clumsy Ogryn trying to, you know, shimmy over to the nearest wall because that's his low cover.
I mean, Mats, is there anything a Vermintide veteran is going to have to unlearn whilst approaching Darktide? Or is it just about learning all the new things that are in there?
I don't think it's necessarily... I mean, at a kind of action level, I don't think there's a lot of stuff to unlearn. I think the weapon special is the biggest thing to kind of get to grips with, because we saw that when we did Vermintide, like, we had very few weapons that had any kind of push follow-up, and then we did push follow-ups for every weapon, and they very quickly become a staple of the gameplay loop. And I remember when we had the early testings and we brought in some Vermintide veterans, and I went like, you guys should really check out the push follow-up, and they go, no one cares about the push follow-up, you silly old designer. And you have to go like, oh, we'll see about that, and a couple of hours later they are, you know, heavily debating which push follow-up to use and what and how to do horde clear and, you know, just maintain kind of situations. We have a very similar thing with the weapon special, because we added weapon specials that are known for I can shoot someone while having a fencing sword in Vermintide. We just added it to all weapons, so some of them are very involved and key to kind of performing with that weapon, where you have the revving of the chainsword, for instance, so knowing when and how to use that as to not get completely, you know, killed while using it, while other weapons has, you know, turn on the flashlight. So we're trying to again make that range of loadout selections where you can lean heavily into different things, but I think Vermintide players will find that the kind of jack of all trades builds that we could see in Vermintide, we've tried to kind of either push that into weapon specials or tried to make it more, you know, you need to refine those things, how to deal with different situations, and in some cases rely more heavily on your team, because it is a thing we've tried to push for.
Another question that sort of stuck out for me, and I'm going to sort of paraphrase it a little bit. It was Andromedaqua, I think, in chat. So from Vermintide 1 to Vermintide 2, we sort of changed how sustain works, the things that people try and focus on to sort of keep themselves alive. Yeah. I think with Vermintide 2, it was like temp health.
Yep.
Have we changed? Are we looking at a new way of sort of reinforcing that in Darktide? Or?
Yeah, I mean, we've changed. The temp health has kind of transformed into what we internally at least call the toughness. Like, toughness is a term stolen directly from Warhammer 40k, which basically denotes how hard it is to wound something, right? And so we went with that. But the toughness kind of takes over, because the temp health is pretty much gone, and we have toughness instead that works both on the range side and to an extent on the melee side, depending on what class you're dealing with. It allows us to provide that sustain, because it's both about like on a class level, we do different setups for it, so we can have Ogryns or veterans that have higher toughness, but they work very good versus ranged, for instance, while zealots have lower toughness but higher means or faster means of regaining them, for instance. So we tie that into very similar features that you saw in Vermintide, with like melee kills grants you toughness back. We have a baseline of coherency with your team, has a dedicated tick to it, and then we can, on a kind of loadout class and talent basis, have configurations for how you actually gain your toughness back. And it's one of the things that we're kind of spending the last things trying to figure out, like how much toughness should, if I melee kill on a thing with the veteran while using this thing, do we want to bump the toughness back up or not? It also ties into a lot of the ability space of Darktide, where we do have the class abilities, but we kind of refer to them as combat abilities, because we want to integrate them more into combat and have them on a shorter cooldown. So a big part of kind of the veteran's ability to kind of have the volley fire or focus in to actually shoot people is he can reset his toughness to a degree with it. So when you're under fire and you're in that panic mode and you need to kind of, you know, shift the tides of battle, you can pop your ability, and that allows you to aim in, ignore suppression, and then get some toughness back, so you can soak a couple of shots and hopefully, headshot 12 elites in the course of 3 seconds to save the day, if you're clutch.
I mean, 100%. I think for me, this is a great example of how we're trying to build this game for replayability in mind. It can get incredibly deep, incredibly fast, and I think that's one of the strengths of Vermintide, and we hope to sort of do justice to that in Darktide, where it's a very approachable experience, but there's a heck of a lot of depth in that. And once you start to figure that out and unpack that, there's lots of fun surprises in that journey. And again, like, Mats is the perfect person to talk about it, so it makes this really easy for me. I just get to sit back a little bit and let's wind them up. Hedge, what's the next one?
Yeah. I was actually too fixated on Matt's answering. I don't know if actually has any questions she's pulled from chat.
But I mean, we can pick up on what Steve says, because I mean, the key. Whenever people ask me stuff, I go on a tangent, and then we're talking about the minute details. But I mean, it's one of the key design principles we are trying to or are maintaining is that the game should be, fun at the start when you don't know what's going on. You're just building corpse walls and mowing down hordes, and it's excellent and good fun. And then through the progression, we try to actually onboard things and tell you stuff, which is we're renowned for trying to do that, but failing sometimes. So we're trying to do that for this game. And then comes that mastery loop when you find your little corner of, with this specific loadout and these specific situations, then I can do this thing if I chain the light and the heavy, but I have this talent and I have this thing, and if I, those kind of, flow mastery experiences. The key thing for us, it's equally important that the game is fun on both ends of that spectrum, right? We don't want to sacrifice immediate fun for new players, or just, the good old, let's just trash through some lower difficulties for the sake of complexity at the higher. Complexity always comes from a place of, it plays right, it feels good, right?
So one of the questions that I've seen asked a little bit in chat and also through other various channels is what we've seen of Psyker is, there are some similarities of, a Conflag staff in Sienna. But as a Sienna player, I actually found playing Psyker a little bit different. What are people who have played Sienna kind of in for when they play Psyker?
Some slight changes that in the end, when you actually start to delve into them, have massive changes on the playtime. No, I mean, it's correct. Like at a glance, and a lot of the things we've looked at what we had in Vermintide, and if stuff works, we don't want to break it and remove stuff. To a degree, we don't just want to copy paste stuff over. But Psyker to us is built out as a more fleshed out magic user, right? It's a Psyker in 40k. It has the connection to the warp and perils and all of that, for those who are familiar with 40k terminology. So what we wanted to do is not only make a Psyker class, or a space wizard as we call it internally, that has a staff that it can do magic with, and then has a bunch of other tools that they don't do magic with. So we've integrated the overcharge system, if you will, from Vermintide, the overheat system, and made that into kind of a Perils of the Warp system for the Psyker, where the more you cast in 40k, or the more you kind of see power from the mysterious warp around you, the more attention from demons and other bad things you kind of draw. And if you overdo it and overextend and lose focus, the demons come and eat your soul, and you explode and die, and we can do horrible things to you in various different ways. What that means in actuality is you now have casting powers on your melee weapon, you now have casting powers instead of your grenades, so you can explode people's head instead of tossing frag grenades. Your ability ties into it in various different ways, and it's all a centralized pool. So you go from casting with 2 different kind of attacks on your staff to switch over to Force Sword to charge that up and do extra damage on the weapon special, to actually locking in, finding that sniper over there that no one is able to reach, and go explode his head, and all kind of build up the same perils. So, and all of them have the venting, and then for the Space Wizard you have your ability that just kind of resets that loop with one of those beautiful shouts, so you can purge out all of the perils and reset your loop and cast even more. Hence the Space Wizard, you get to cast loads of magic all the time, but it's just more Sienna on all different melee ranged grenade ability slot.
Yeah, I think one of the things from Gamescom that I was surprised to see is how fast many players picked it up. It's one of the things where it's a more complicated class to learn. I think our veteran is the sort of probably one of the easier ones for the average person who hasn't really jumped in and played Darktide to just grab and go. I was very pleasantly surprised at Gamescom to see how many players were able to just jump in. The Psyker is such a powerful, I want to play like this type of a fantasy. So you saw a lot of players sort of gravitate towards that, sit in front of that chair, and actually be able to pick it up and do it justice in this very short window. So I think that for me, actually, it's one of my favorite classes to play right now, although I tend to gravitate more towards the veteran or the zealot traditionally, or historically at least. So I think we found a really good balance there on how easy it is to get into that one right now, but it is incredibly deep, and it has some of the most fun abilities, I think, right now, which, yeah. They're great.
I mean, we usually, when we do quick intros for journalists or for playtesters, we usually go, and here's the Psyker, you get the ability, you get a bit more almost MOBA-esque experience of balancing 5 different really powerful abilities without, exploding. So it's one of the few classes I've seen people actually stand back and not really do anything because they're like, and then they do a really cool thing that massively changes the scenario they're in, and then they go back and kind of vent and pace themselves, because they are very much glass cannon in certain loadouts, which are super important, but it's a very, very stand back from the action and ensure that the safety of the team kind of works without just being consumed by demons, I suppose.
Do you have a favorite class right now, or are they all your baby?
I mean, I always tend to fall in love with whatever I'm working on. It's one of the hazards of it, right? When you're if I'm working the Ripper gun for the Ogryn, I'm like, yes, I did it, the best thing ever, and then you switch over and go Stub Revolver, and you're like, yes, this is so much better. So I think I was such a hardcore FPS player back in the 90s, so veteran for me feels very home, right? I think I spent between 10 and 12 hours playing Counter-Strike for a couple of years there, working on phone support, because you could do that. So that whole thing of, just going in and, oh, here's 5 guys, there's 5 headshots, I now feel zen. It's very, very, very favorite for me.
I have a question for Steve
I have a question
from
before I
Pontus.
let Hedge pull some more from the chat. We've done some things in Darktide that are kind of new for us in the Tide series. I saw some stuff being worked on upstairs, oh my god, but particularly with character customization, that's something we've never had in the Tide series. What was kind of the decision for that, and how has that kind of shaped the game and how it's being played?
I think there's multiple different reasons for going that route. To a degree, a lot of us come at Warhammer and the kind of the lore and the IP from a very role-play perspective. I always think that, I assume that has a point to it. To a large degree, it is down to us being able to afford players the opportunity to build your own characters, because there is a very, very strong charm in that. And for Darktide, we kind of wanted to change the way we tell the story a bit. For Vermintide, it's very much the retelling of the legend of the Übersreich 5 and what happens, right? And when you go on missions, you kind of have this, oh, this is the time we went and dealt with Urgelsplat, Blurgelflarg, right? Then you retell that over and over again. And here we wanted to do a much more immediate kind of narrative of, you start out as the lowly prisoner, you get to craft and define your own backstory and who you are, and then it's an ongoing, unfolding narrative of things happening now in the Hive. And the narrative and the story we're telling and the experience is very much split between your own personal kind of journey of being accepted within the Inquisition and climbing the ranks and possibly one day surviving a mission and actually having done something, and further on to becoming a fully fledged kind of inquisitorial acolyte with your own strike team and cool ribbons or whatever, right? And at the same time, the kind of unfolding events of Atoma Prime and what's happening in the Hive. From a more technical and perhaps game industry point of view, it allows us to basically build more stuff faster. One of the things we wanted to get at is we want to be able to build and produce classes faster and include them in the game. We want you to have more freedom in loadout configurations. Like if you want to do 4 Ogrins, just go play 4 Ogrins, right? You can stack them together however you want, and that widens the palette for us, because Vermintide, we built that with a very rigid kind of system, which was very nice and very strong, but you know, you couldn't have more than one Bardin.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think for a lot of us, I think the big part of 40K, especially coming from like tabletop, was spending probably way too many hours with very sharp knives trying to custom build these little figurines. And so part of it was like this is part of what we want to bring into this new experience. And so I think we talked actually not that long about it. It was just kind of we just need a character creator. I mean, this makes so much sense for so many reasons. And I'm really looking forward to seeing all of the characters that are created using this thing, because the team has put so much work into the options that you're able to use to customize your characters. And so it's going to be, without spoiling much, it's going to be, I'm looking forward to that part of when we go live.
Yeah,
I'll leave it
Yeah,
there.
I mean, it's very 40K, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
A question for Steve from chat, from Pontus. So who's your favorite 40K author, and why is it Dan Abnett?
That's a tough question. I mean, Dan Abnett is one of the absolute greats, and it's been such an honor to work with him. Fortunately for us, we've had many other authors from 40K, from Games Workshop jump in, and I refuse to pick a favorite, although I refuse to say who my favorite is. I'll put it that way. I love them all. I think that they do great work, and we're very honored to work with so many talented people, not just on the writing side, but also in like concept and music, and we've got some amazing outsourcing partners. So, yeah, that's my answer, Pontus. Nice try. No, Dan is amazing. We love him, of course, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm just digging for questions.
Yeah, no. Everyone is watching chat, trying to.
So, with the character customization, what can players expect in terms of voice lines? Are they going to be as robust as Vermintide? Vermintide's got some pretty memorable stuff in there.
Yes.
Great.
I mean, I did ask a pretty yes/no question, so yeah, that's totally fair.
No, but I mean, it's one of the more common things that we get asked both by players and community and journalists. And I mean, it was one of our biggest concerns when we talked about it early on. Like, can we do this without like making less of a thing than the Vermintide thing? So we, and as with all things that we're worried about, we have a tendency to just go in and kind of hyper focus in on stuff and overdo it. So I think I don't remember the number of lines we have. Possibly Steve knows, but we have more, and we've ensured that you should get a very nice, fully fledged dialogue. Full with all of the catchphrase stuff and the memorable things, regardless of kind of combination of classes that you play. So I mean, having 3 Ogrins run around talking to each other is one of my favorite things, specifically if you're a Psyker, because the Psyker is kind of high and mighty in some of the kind of personalities and stuff that we put in there.
Yeah.
So it becomes very much a kind of, yes, come on, move along, stop, killing everything twice, that sort of thing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think the easy thing to say is the character-to-character banter in Vermintide we've always seen as one of our absolute strengths, and we have put so much time and energy into making sure that makes the jump into our new way of approaching characters, and I think that you'll be pleasantly surprised and have a fair amount of very quotable things in the near future.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes,
So.
the long version, right?
There's one question here. Is there any weapon overlap for classes, or is it more sort of traditional like Vermintide, where things are kind of, you know, your characters have certain setups?
Yes, we have plenty of Ogrins running around using force staffs from the Psyker casting spell.
Naturally.
There are naturally stuff that is locked per class or locked lore-wise for certain things. We do approach this with more of an overlap approach, and that's mainly down to lore reasons. Like las guns are very common. You can always fall back and use a las gun. One of the more interesting builds I've seen, and this is kind of one of the things that we are discussing and looking at, but like making a Psyker build with a stub revolver instead, because you want to lean into using your overcharge for melee stuff or for head explosions, and thus have an option to kind of go into the ranged space without putting a burden on your warp overcharge thing, is very interesting. So I think from our perspective, it goes along the lines of the class selection, where we just kind of widen things up to allow you to configure a way bigger palette of different experiences and fire team kind of configurations. And then, like, for the more special stuff or for the more cool stuff, we tend to kind of lock them in for certain classes. Both mainly, to be honest, from a lore perspective, but it helps with the balancing of things. Certain combinations just becomes, you know, bad.
Lancer Echo says, it would be funny to see an Ogre duct tape together a bunch of force staves and using it as a club.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe that's something that could happen with April Fools, like a first April Fool's idea, yeah.
No problems.
Feels like Ogre logic.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yes. We've had some weird, like during production, you always have let's just attach the thing and then try out, and then when you get like Ogre stuff on other character or the vice versa, it's just a size difference really, because like he's a big guy and he's that grown to have very big arms and very big hands. So some of the things he needs to be able to handle, like an ammo pack or something, becomes like a hello, I'm gonna now, and then when you do it for the other characters, we have problems fitting it on screen. So there's a lot of strange things that have happened during production where you go like, he just lost his weapon. No, it's a last pistol, and it's bugs.
Should we build one of the Ogre combat knives in real life? Do you think any of us could lift that?
I mean, I could lift the sword that we did for Vermintide, and that was big. But I mean, I think that's the closest thing we have, because it's about the size of a average human body. It's
Is that
ridiculous.
2 meters tall?
No. Yes, that's the average. The human
Okay.
body for me is 2 meters tall. Anything else is tiny.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. That's actually a problem for me, because I have so many friends who go like, well, I'm actually kind of tall, and I'm like, no, you're in the same category as all the rest of the people in this space.
Shorter
Because
than me.
yeah, it's difficult. I'm a horrible witness. Can you describe him? He was really short, like 192 centimeters.
Joke, at least.
Yeah. Yep.
So Matt, what's been your favorite new addition to Darktide to work on?
That's, I think, from a kind of engineering brain work perspective, it's been the expansion and construction of the ranged kind of systems to a degree, because we are doing. I had a question from one of the coders who I was like, who else is doing this? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think anyone else is doing it, because we have put a lot of effort into having a combined recoil system together with a swaying system, together with like the dynamic blend states, and these are very fancy game dev terms, but basically we have full analog control over how the gun behaves, and then we animate the gun accordingly. So if you're getting hit and you kind of tilt the gun to the left with recoil and the offsets and hit reacts, the gun actually shoots the way it's pointing. We don't do that, like the gun is pointed that way and then the shots just kind of randomly go off. So you get, it's a fascinating system to work with, because it's so many numbers and it's so complicated that you go zen immediately as you try to tweak something, and then at the same time it's very fun playing it, because you can actually master it to a very nice level where you go like, my aim is off to the left, like halfway off the screen almost, and if you tweak it wrong, but you can still land a headshot over there because oh, there was a guy there. I'm just gonna go boom.
So it's not just complexity for the sake of it, but
No.
but it it works.
But it goes into like we want to do additions to this where we have more in depth. Like we have some weapon progression on there. You can do some quality things with stuff, so you can actually have your experience of being a very new recruit, a prisoner, come in with your kind of I won't call it shitty las gun because all las guns are holy relics of the emperor and all of that. It's a very, very robust functional las gun, but you can actually find stuff that performs better. And with this type of implementation, it allows us to just kind of seamlessly and effortlessly pinpoint your las gun and tune it accordingly. It's very nice. It also it just makes the veteran ability, because there we can just kind of tighten everything up live time. So if you're going and having some recoil and you have to work with that, and there's stuff going on, you press your veteran ability and you kind of go and ignore all of that for a second before kind of effortlessly and seamlessly just going back into the normal. Plus it feels nice.
Can you tell us a little bit about how difficulty works in Darktide?
We basically just spawn stuff until you die. And then hope you enjoy that. No, so we've tried to keep on a principle level at least. Like Vermintide has always been a game that shines when it's a bit on the challenging side. We have a statement like die horribly screaming together while having fun is key to the experience to a degree. I think we saw that in Gamescom as well, where people they just fail, but they are really enjoying it. What is going on? And you go like, yes. We've tried to keep that. We have the difficulty scalings. We have expanded on that, at least on the kind of principle side. Again, with this, let's provide a wider palette of experiences. So we have a normal kind of difficulty scaling, but we also have a separate control where we can manipulate kind of the population sizes. It basically creates this thing where if you want to play on high difficulties, but you want to have less population, basically going, I just want to face lots and lots of elites and have more of a kind of, I'm gonna run through this Spec Ops style adventure, but it's still challenging. You can. If you want to have a game where you have a low difficulty but really high populations, corpse wall building simulator, if you will, you can, and then we can kind of mutate that and set it up in between. We do have the same kind of core setup for difficulty. So vanilla, you can, just pick your difficulty. I think we have 5 currently, but it's on depending on how you slice it. But it's basically down to we want to provide you with a clear-cut choice of. You have that, mastery progression over clearing new difficulties is very similar to what we're trying to do or what we did in Vermintide, but then just have that expansion on the side for, seeing a lot of those behaviors in Vermintide too, where people want to kind of experiment some with the spawning and difficulty management, where we want to have that built in.
I think dynamics is a really good way to think about it. We definitely want to make sure that, if you've got your crew together and your game face on, we're going to have something for you. And if maybe it's later at night and you just got back from partaking in a few beverages and you want to still play, there's an experience for you. You can still jump in and have fun. And
the Zen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, otherwise we're using a lot of the same kind of the core systems that we saw in Vermintide. We have fully dynamic spawns. It's a conflict director-esque thing. It challenges you, so any replay or any experience is going to differ depending on luck or what's going on, and you never know. I mean, as a designer, it's a really interesting challenge because it's kind of second-hand designing. Because I can't say first there's going to be this guy, and then 5 of these, and then 500 poxwalkers, and then finish it off with a flamer, and that's going to be an interesting scenario, right? It's very much about tuning settings and dynamics and setting limits and checking in and keeping tabs on how the players are progressing and what's going on, and ensuring that the dynamic systems basically have, 2 parts to it. One that is just trying to kill you all the time, and one more benevolent part of it that goes, perhaps we should give them some space. at the same time, and that results in a very dynamic, surprisingly fun experience.
Definitely. One that you want to play over and over and over and over. And
Yeah,
over again.
it's like it's getting to a problem. Like I found myself the other day going, I need a break. I shall now play games, and then you go, or I will just run combat level reference thing a couple of times with that weapon that I haven't played in a while, because girlfriend is concerned for my mental health.
You pulled any cool questions out actually from the chat? Just having a scan through now. I guess, Steve, what is your favourite addition to Darktide over the Vermintide series?
I think our mission board is one of the coolest things that we've added in how we approach displaying missions, and that also plays into sort of what we were talking about just now around difficulties and sort of the amount of enemies and sort of challenges that are presented on that. I think it just makes this sort of world feel alive in a way that we hadn't had before. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to see how that changes how players approach playing the game. It's such a core part of the experience that, yeah, it's the top of my head. Character creator as well. I come from making a bunch of like RPG games back in the day, and so seeing a lot more of those elements make it in, it feels like home a little bit. It's like we're kind of back in this sort of warm blanket of RPG land that I stepped away from for a couple of years. So I think those two combined just make it for me. And the voices, I love them. We've got some amazing cast and crew that have some of the best voices. Yeah, very memorable. So I don't know. It's a whole bunch of stuff. I think this is sort of a dream game for me. It's, yeah.
Tough question, isn't it? Yeah, I think for me it's the character creator too. I mean, it just, like I say, it speaks so strongly to the creativity of building your armies in 40k, and just the flexibility of being able to try different team loadouts. You know, like let's just throw 4 Roguns at this and see how it goes. Like it could be the funniest thing in the world. It could be the hardest thing in the world. You know, and for me that just opens up so many more doors that weren't necessarily open to players in Vermintide. Yeah.
So, Stockpile Andreas says that there's a lot of choice on how to play in Vermintide. How does that compare to Darktide?
More, I think. I mean, it comes down to how you define choice, really. But I mean, I think that the same kind of in Vermintide, I think a lot of the definition of a loadout and the definition of what you're playing. I mean, it comes from both what class you pick and what weapon you bring to the table, and we still have that for Darktide. It's one of the, you know, combinatory, like, okay, what melee weapon and what ranged weapon and what class combination together with the configuration of the progression of those. I would say that the expansion into the more kind of ranged combat area also expands that type of choice to a degree, and then like we said, with the class mixing and the character creator and the kind of mission approach, we have, it's one of the bittersweet realizations when we have design meetings, sitting down and going like, this is a lot of different things, because you can be experiencing a very wide array of different things, and all of them works and should work and needs some tender loving care from time to time to make them work, right? But that's part of the fun, at least for me. I mean, as I said, it's one of the, you go into your Zen brain, read the matrix, and like, I will now do the spawning tables of the different various pack configurations for different levels, and then you just sit and scroll through code and set something up, and then people go, what are you doing? And I'm like, I am making the game harder or more fun, right? Yeah.
I have a question when it comes to sort of designing an overall game feel, I guess. So in Vermintide, obviously we had sort of 4 regular-sized characters and then one shorter one. Now it's quite easy to design a game around 4 regular-sized people and then adding in a shorter one. With Darktide, obviously, we have sort of to start with four character types, 3 of which are sort of regular size, and 1 of them is massive.
Yep.
Has that made it like more difficult to actually build a game around that sort of not limitation, but size difference?
No, it has been effortless, of course. We just clicked the auto scale all covers and doors to fit Ogrin, and then magically they just became the appropriate size and worked. Now it's been quite a, I mean, it depends on the various different parts of the game, but I think the level design department has had most headache and then sadness based on the Ogrin, and we had a lot of scaling discussions on exactly how big should he be and how big should and where can he go. But I mean, it goes through in a lot of the details of like the locomotion, like so that the human characters, they can kind of sprint and vault over stuff, and the Ogrin, he's a bit more cumbersome, so he can still do that, but not to the same degree. And we need to build twice as many systems or 2 versions of a lot of the systems in order to support the size. It is also kind of a, since we knew we wanted to do this from the get-go, it is also something that we have been leaning into. And I mean, even though Bardin and his shorter stature appears to be more effortless, he had his fair share of problems. Some of them, like the against the grain fields, we just went, he can't see unless he jumps. That's just how that's gonna work, because it kind of goes with the flow. But no, it's been a lot of fun and a lot of gritting of teeth and realization of, so low covers does nothing for Ogrins, and high covers doesn't really kind of work either when we go through the metrics of how we set things up. But I think it's for us, it's one of the staples of how we approach a lot of these things. You need to test, you need to use an overused term, iterate, and kind of follow the fun of it. It's one of the reasons why we throw in stuff like the toughness and the sprinting and dodging, and then we make that work, and then we go, and how should the Ogrin work with this? Like, an Ogrin isn't really sprinting and dodging stuff, he's more just face tanking things until he realizes that he's been hurt, and then we have to redo some of the systems custom for him to realize the feeling of you being a massive hulking brute kind of wading straight into enemy gunfire while going right. So there's a long list of things we've changed and added and to make it play right, but I think it's been worth it, because I mean, I like getting saved by an Ogrin when you're kind of being overrun or you're crying behind a cover getting outshot by a bunch of enemy machine gunners is one of the most beautiful feelings in the world. Be it he coming in with the Ripper gun just making everyone shut up, or charging in and just saving you. It's very secure.
But we also have a lot of big enemies, if you want to talk about that as well.
Yeah.
We've got, it's not just player characters like the Ogrin that are huge.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the perks of doing the player Ogrin is that it enabled us to kind of do enemy Ogrins as well, because they can effortlessly move all across the different spaces in the game, because the player has to be able to do that. And then we have the monsters, which has always been like the rat ogre for Vermintide, the first one we did, was always a huge but he won't fit here, or how should he be able to do so? I think, I mean, it comes with experience too, where we're better at making game spaces, to use a sophisticated term for level layout, that allows for that. But it does bring with it the kind of the weird sense of epic scale that 40k has, because everything is kind of massive and then some, right? So getting that, like, I can be a tall veteran, but then I have an Ogrin buddy and he's even bigger, and then the enemy Ogrins, they are friends with Nurgle, so they are slightly bigger, and then they bring the Plague Ogrin out and he's huge, and all of that kind of just fades away in the backdrops of the epicness of the Hive.
Yeah.
Right?
My producer sense is tingling. Leo, are you able to stay with us, or you gotta duck out?
I actually have to duck out. But the stream will continue.
Okay.
I just unfortunately cannot. But thank you for having me. Thank you for answering my questions. Thank you for answering chat's questions so far.
Cool.
I'm sure there'll be more coming in. And love to you all. Mwah.
Cheers, Edge. Thanks for
Bye, Leo.
everything. As
Miss you
usual.
already.
Right on, yeah.
Oof, just like that, he's gone.
Just like that. That quick. Disappeared.
Okay, I have no idea how to make this work, so I guess you can all just
Just
shift
crowd
over to
around.
the right.
Yeah.
Over that side.
And we'll see if you can make us a note.
Get cozy.
Yes.
I don't know
Look.
how. Like, am I in camera now?
No, you are. I think.
Kind
if
of.
you look at
yeah,
that screen,
yeah.
at least.
I'm kind of in camera. Yeah. Okay. So I'm like
Leaning in.
half here. Yeah, yeah. All right. Let's see here.
I saw a question
There
about.
there are some things that we are not ready to talk about yet. We can't show our whole winning hands yet, so it's not like we're intentionally like we're just not gonna answer that. We'll reveal stuff when it's time. My hair is in the camera. That's why it's away, just in case. Yeah, there we go. That's gonna be me for today. All right, let's see what we have here. I'm going to reframe this question a little bit so it's not completely, revealing too much, but how do you choose what aspects of 40K to put into cosmetics and kind of the
We
things that you put in? Yeah.
We fight a lot. No, but I think it's one of those things where most people in the studio have some kind of connection to 40K, and some people have a bit too much connection to 40K because we are quite nerdy when it comes to stuff like that. So everyone has their own favorite to a degree, and at the end of the day we have a very, very, very clear-cut kind of flow of we ask Anders what we put into the game, and then that gets put in, because if everyone got to decide for themselves, this game would be overflowing with everything from Tau to orcs to
I knew you were going to
squats
say
to
orcs.
whatever.
I was like,
Yeah,
So
I've been playing orcs since
I feel like this was
1994.
something that's been brought up.
Sometime
Yeah.
it's gonna stick, right?
no, it's very true what you're
Yeah.
saying. Absolutely.
But I mean, it's one of the reasons why we, from a kind of story perspective, when we talked about how to position this as well, like having the Inquisition involved and having this be an inquisitorial kind of retinue thing, it allows us to throw a quite wide net over the lore stuff and fluff from 40K, because if we wanted to, go off on a tangent and pick up stuff that is in the lore, one of the few organizations or places you would see all of those things gathered together is under an Inquisitor, because who is going to question what the Inquisitor allows people to bring to the table to a degree? There are other parts of the 40K world where that is stuff would be considered heretical and not be allowed, for instance. But it's a constant question. I mean, I think it also poses a very interesting kind of design challenge, because you're not tasked with coming up with things. You're asked with taking a massive list of cool stuff that everyone wants to make, and then slimming that down into what makes a nice package and kind of the top of the list that you want to do. And it's been very similar to how we worked in Vermintide, because fantasy has a lot of stuff in it as well.
Yeah, I think the sort of objective that we have is to try to make as much of the things that you guys will want present in Darktide as fast as we can build them. There's so many cool things to do in the lore, and so many very unique and distinct looks. So there's this sort of wealth of stuff out there that we're just trying to, as fast as possible, where it makes sense, pull it in and allow you to sort of play around and make the characters that you want to make.
Yeah. And then have the wonderful challenge of trying to figure out how stuff actually works. Because like 40K and Warhammer, it's brilliant. But it's also brilliant in its way of being enough lack of detail to actually explain exactly what sound does a lasgun do when it shoots. And then we get to bring all of those things in and then have heated debates on exactly how things work and how we realize them with enough kind of zoomed in perspective to, make even the nerdiest of us go crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much fun.
I think because this mechanic was in the Gamescom build, we can talk about it. So in Vermintide, when you die, you respawn and you're basically tied up and waiting to be rescued. Is there something similar like that in Darktide?
Yep, pretty much. I mean, it's one of the things that was key to the Vermintide experience. We consider the gameplay of Vermintide and Darktide to be cut up into rounds. It's just that we never know when a round starts and when a round ends. That's kind of up to the dynamically spawning enemies. And we view that as we will concoct a big challenge, a scenario for you, toss that at you, and if you die during that scenario, we need you to be able to reset if the remaining members of the group survive and can move on afterwards. So we're trying to recreate that thing. It's very much what we wanted to do in Vermintide, where if you actually make it through because someone is clutching, then you get to pick your friends back up again. And so it's a very similar system. It's just kind of tailored into the 40k thing of, you know, the bad guys have captured you even though we clearly saw you got eaten by something or, you know, fell down into a lava pit.
Yeah.
But, you know, they caught you and now we get to rescue you later. It also, I mean, it just provides good old clutch screaming at the screen fun of having your last remaining alive friend trying to handle a massive horde filled with ogrins.
What's the... In Vermintide, you have a hub because we are peer-to-peer, and so people join you or you join a game, and it's your own little area. Since we have dedicated servers now for Darktide, how is our hub different in Darktide?
It's on a ship. It's not in
No,
a
not allowed to talk about it. I guess you're gonna have to wait and see. You're gonna have to wait and see. It's a surprise then. It's a surprise. They're keeping me honest. I thought there was a mini sienna hanging from my hair. Not quite sure how you saw that. Let's see. I think we have time for one or two more questions.
I have a microphone in the way for the questions. I'm going to try to lean.
That's a table, not a mouse.
Yeah.
Let's see.
We have that problem in the studio. There's too many like 40k tape measures lying around. People mistake for mice.
It's really handy when you need to measure stuff.
Yeah, dude, it's very like the picking up a play of a kill team or something is usually not a problem. I need to grab more time to play though.
I guess we could end on this question. How do you guys decide what weapons to put into the game?
Rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, we go by
More
height,
fights?
and it's very similar to the other question. Again, there's so many weapons in. I mean, I know we early on kind of we sat down and did the grand weapon list, which was a fun exercise because it was basically two camps, people who knew 40k, and we went, here are like 150 different things we could add to the game, and then people who didn't know 40k that went like, what are all of these? And we're like, well, obviously you know that this is that, right? So it's to us it's an exercise of just doing our homework of identifying all the different cool weapons that we've either are known within the 40k universe or are really obscure, and like there is this specific pattern out of this thing that is mentioned in this book from 1987, and like one of the coders has the Imperial Guardsman primer going through that and checking out all the weapons, make that huge list. And then it's a kind of split between what looks cool, what we really want to do, what Anders, the game director, and Art are really into, because that's equally important. And then for game balancing reasons, can we build a varied enough arsenal that we support co-play?
Yeah.
And the kind of the player fantasies and roles that we need for the game to kind of flow, because we still have that, the core principle of you need to take turns taking your place in the spotlight. Like, if there is a massive horde, you want to have someone bring the Ripper gun or something more horde cleary, depending on how you want to approach that. If there is a lot of like super armored Ogryn executors coming at you, you probably want to have some loadout guys that can deal with that type of armor, and then you rotate, and the game forces you to rotate, because you need to be dealing with multiple different things at the same time. No one can do it all, and you need to rely on your team to cover all of the bases. Hence the enjoyable experience of being, you know, I'm on the back line just making sure that no one gets grabbed at the time, and it's equally important as the big hulking Ogryn just kind of sawing or slashing his way through a massive horde.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely want to see a lot of the conversations going into a match around like what are you bringing hardware wise,
Yeah.
so that you have a balanced party, and then hopefully you don't die.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, we do a lot of those discussions. I had one this morning with people who went like, we tried to break the game by just bringing 4 Ogryns with all one type of weapon, and like it was so easy until, you know, the elites came on, and then we realized we have nothing. We basically had to like take turns getting knocked down to get at them. So I mean, there is that type of, when you're pushing the higher difficulties, there's bound to be a lot of kind of team configuration discussions to be able to do stuff.
Yeah.
Or just clutch the hell out of the game and be, you know, because you can manage most things, it's just really, really, really tricky.
So for both of you, I think we're going to close on this question, is what will be your one tip for a Vermintide player coming into Darktide and a new player coming into Darktide?
One tip.
Can be one for each.
I've got my for both. I think start playing Vermintide right now up until release. Just start playing Vermintide right now. It's an awesome game. You will learn a ton, and it's a good primer for what we've got coming to you really soon.
Yep. No, I mean, for players who aren't familiar with Vermintide, I would say go pick up Vermintide because you have a strong foundation, you have good fun there. For others, the best way to prepare, I would say go read a lot of Dan Abnett books. Because, I mean, there is a very, I mean, one of the things we've seen is the game, it's a good game, but if you're kind of into the lore and you can appreciate some of the little things and some of the nuances, because, you know, I always get a little teary when people go like, I saw that you did the little detailed thing that, you know, and it's not mentioned and not a lot of people know about it.
Yeah.
It brings quite a lot to the experience. So if you're unfamiliar with 40k and kind of have played Vermintide before, you know, get into it a bit, because it is a fantastic IP of grim, dark, horrible future where there is only war and, you know, all the different nuances of that.
Yes.
At least understand what corpse starch is.
Delicious.
Yeah.
Alrighty, thank you guys. I give up being in the camera. Can you just hold this guy and we'll put him to the mic? There we go. Okay, so before we head out, I want everyone to know that the first weekend of the Onslaught series is going to be tomorrow and Sunday, starting at noon CEST, and then tier 3 and 4 will be the next weekend at the same time. It is for charity, so if you donate 5 of your currency, directions are in the Onslaught series Discord, you will receive a Crown of Purity, doesn't matter what platform you're on, and I believe they have currently raised about 3,500 American dollars for charity.
Cool.
Yeah, all from the community. So good job to guys.
Nice.
If we're lucky, maybe we can get a Fatshark team playing the next week. So we will see you all in 2 weeks for another stream. And take it easy, and thank you guys for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
It was fun. Great.
Take care, guys. Bye.